Let me teach you something today, because some of y'all have been playing small. You've been shrinking in rooms you were meant to shine in. You've been walking around trying to protect what little you got when God is calling you to risk it all for something greater. When you believe you have nothing to lose, something begins to shift inside you. Your posture changes, your decisions become bolder, your voice gets stronger. You stop tiptoeing around life and you start walking with intention. Desperation, hear me, is not a weakness, it's a force. It pulls out of you what comfort and safety never could. When you are desperate, when you've been backed into a corner, when the walls are closing in and you've got nowhere to run, that's when boldness rises up out of your belly. That's when you find out what you're really made of. You stop worrying about the approval of others. You stop rehearsing all the reasons why it might not work. You stop delaying your destiny because you're waiting for conditions to be perfect. There is something powerful about the mindset of a person who has let go of fear. When you've been through hell, when you've lost people, lost opportunities, cried in silence, and survived seasons that tried to kill you, you come out on the other side with a holy boldness. You learn how to speak up for yourself. You learn how to ask for what you deserve. You learn how to move forward even when your knees are trembling. You become dangerous to the enemy because you are no longer trying to protect what little you have. You're now fighting for what you were born to become. This world teaches us to play it safe, stay in line. Don't ruffle feathers, wait your turn, but people who act like they have nothing to lose are the ones who break ceilings. They're the ones who start the business with no investors. They write the book with no publisher. They preach the message with no microphone. They step out of the boat while everybody else stays seated and safe. There is a boldness that only comes when you've made peace with the possibility of failure and decided to try anyway. If you study the lives of people who made a mark on history, you'll find that most of them didn't start with power. They started with pressure. They didn't start with resources. They started with resistance. They didn't step into the spotlight. They stepped into the storm, and because they had nothing to lose, they had the freedom to be bold. They risked being misunderstood. They risked being mocked. They risked being alone. But their purpose was louder than their fear. Their calling outweighed their comfort. Their desperation gave birth to their destiny. Let me teach you something deeper. Boldness isn't just a feeling. It's a decision. It's not about personality. It's about posture. You can be quiet and still be bold. You can be gentle and still be powerful. Because boldness comes from a place of knowing that staying where I am is more dangerous than moving forward. The cost of playing it safe is too high when you've been called to walk by faith. Desperation births clarity. When you have nothing to lose, you suddenly see what matters. You stop sweating the small stuff. You stop second, guessing every move. You stop negotiating with voices that were never invested in your victory. You start dreaming louder. You start loving harder. You start living fuller. You begin to walk like the chains are already broken, like the door is already open, like the victory is already yours. And hear me, this kind of mindset isn't reckless, it's responsible. It's responsible to honor your calling. It's responsible to pour out the gift that God placed inside of you. It's responsible to stop playing small when heaven has given you greatness. Playing it safe may protect your image, but it will never unlock your impact. Do you know why some people never see breakthrough? Because they're still clinging to something. Clinging to people who drain them. Clinging to systems that limit them. Clinging to mindsets that enslave them. But when you come to the place where you let go of what they think, let go of your old self, let go of needing everything to make sense, you free yourself to leap. You free yourself to stretch. You free yourself to climb. You don't need all the answers. You just need the audacity to act. You don't need every door to be open. You just need the courage to knock. And if it doesn't open, kick it. If it doesn't move, Push it. If it doesn't work the first time, try again, because you have nothing to lose but everything to gain. Desperation is divine when it drives you to purpose. Don't despise the season that made you desperate. It's the same season that made you dangerous. Because now you're not praying safe prayers, you're praying bold ones, you're not asking for small blessings, you're commanding mountains to move, you're not just surviving, you're stepping, you're stretching, you're soaring. So stop waiting, stop playing defense, stop pacing the floor of your purpose, stand up, square your shoulders, set your face like flint, and move like there's no plan B, because the truth is, destiny never bows to caution. It answers to boldness, boldness that's been born in the fire, boldness that rises out of the ashes, boldness that comes from acting like you have nothing to lose. Fear is a manipulator. It speaks in whispers and it wraps itself around your mind like a chain, holding you hostage to what-ifs and worst-case scenarios. But when faith shows up, fear has to flee, because faith and fear cannot occupy the same space at the same time. One will always drive out the other. And when you act like you have nothing to lose, when you allow faith to rise up in you, fear loses its grip. It no longer has power over your decisions, over your direction, or over your destiny. You see, fear thrives in control. It grows in the soil of safety and predictability. It convinces you that the unknown is dangerous, that stepping out will destroy you, that trying again will only end in heartbreak. But when you allow faith to lead, your whole posture changes. You're no longer driven by self-preservation. You're driven by revelation. You stop asking, "What if I fail?" and start declaring, "What if I fly?" You stop focusing on who might walk away and start focusing on who God is calling you to become. Fear wants to protect your ego. Faith wants to protect your purpose. Fear says, play small so you won't get hurt. Faith says, step out so you can grow strong. When you act like you have nothing to lose, it doesn't mean you become reckless. It means you become relentless, relentless in your pursuit, relentless in your obedience, relentless in your belief that God has not brought you this far to leave you now. Let me talk to the one who's been stuck in analysis, stuck in worry, stuck in doubt. Every time you get ready to move, fear whispers, "Not yet." Every time you try to step, fear reminds you of your past. Every time you try to dream, fear starts calculating the cost. But faith doesn't need all the answers. Faith doesn't require the blueprint. Faith just needs a yes, a surrendered yes, a committed yes. A yes that says, even if I'm scared, I'll still move. Even if I'm unsure, I'll still obey. When Peter stepped out of the boat, he didn't have all the facts, he didn't have a life jacket, he didn't have backup. But he had faith, and faith got him out on the water. Faith got him doing what fear said was impossible. It wasn't that the waves disappeared. It wasn't that the storm stopped. It was that faith made him walk where fear said he would drown. And the same is true for you. When you act like you have nothing to lose, you begin to walk above the things that used to sink you. Let me teach you something. Faith does not always make sense, but it always makes movement. It gets you out of the comfort zone. It pulls you away from the familiar. It stretches your capacity. It forces you to trust, not in what you see, but in what you believe. And when faith takes over, your mind stops calculating risk, and your heart starts declaring truth. Some of us have been bowing to fear for so long, we think it's normal. We've made peace with limitation. We've decorated our prison and called it a plan. But God is calling you higher. He's calling you into a space where faith is your foundation, not fear. Where you dream again, where you launch again, where you forgive again, where you believe again. Because when faith takes over, everything changes. You begin to think different, speak different, walk different. You stop negotiating with your destiny. You stop minimizing your gift. You stop asking for confirmation when God already gave you instruction. Because now you're not driven by outcomes. You're driven by obedience. You're not chasing applause. You're chasing assignment. You're not walking for safety. You're walking for impact. Faith doesn't mean you won't feel fear. It means fear no longer gets the final say. It means fear can speak, but it doesn't lead. Fear can rise, but it won't rule, because your faith is louder than your doubt. Your faith is deeper than your insecurity. Your faith is stronger than your fear. Let me go deeper. When you stop fearing loss, you start living with freedom. When you stop fearing failure, you start stepping into your future. When you stop fearing judgment, you start operating in your full capacity. Some of the greatest breakthroughs happen not because someone had everything figured out, but because they stopped letting fear decide their fate. You can't control people. You can't control outcomes. You can't control every detail, but you can control your yes. You can control your obedience. You can control your agreement with faith. And when you agree with faith, mountains move. When you agree with faith, doors open. When you agree with faith, the impossible becomes possible. So today, I'm calling you to shift. Shift from fear. Based thinking to faith. Fueled living. Shift from comfort to courage. Shift from delay to decision. Shift from questioning to trusting. Because the moment you act like you have nothing to lose, faith will rise up like a lion in your chest. And everything that used to paralyze you will become the platform God uses to elevate you. You don't really start learning until you stop being afraid to fail. That's when true growth begins. That's when life becomes your classroom, and every moment, every misstep, every closed door becomes a lesson. You see, as long as you're trying to avoid failure, you're also avoiding development. You can't mature in your mind, your spirit, or your purpose if you're still tiptoeing around the possibility of getting it wrong. Growth is not birthed in perfection. It is born in the fire of trial and error. We live in a world that glorifies success but hides the process. We see the awards, the highlights, the platform, but we don't see the pain, the rejection, the nights spent questioning, God, did I hear you right? And so, many of us wait. We wait until we feel perfect. We wait until we feel ready. We wait until we are guaranteed the outcome. But life doesn't teach those who wait. Life teaches those who try. Life rewards the doer, not just the dreamer. You learn the most when you are not paralyzed by fear of failure, when you can step out and say, even if I don't win, I will grow. Even if it doesn't go the way I planned, I'll come out wiser. That kind of mentality creates dangerous people. Not dangerous to others, dangerous to the devil, dangerous to mediocrity, dangerous to generational curses. Because once you've stopped fearing failure, you've become someone that hell can't hold and man can't limit. You see, failure is not final, it's formative, it shapes your character, it reveals your resilience, it teaches you how to get back up, how to correct, how to recalibrate. God is not looking for perfect vessels, He's looking for willing ones. And the willing must be brave enough to fail in public. You've got to be bold enough to look foolish. You've got to be courageous enough to not get it right the first time and still try again. Think about the disciples. They didn't get it right every time. Peter denied Jesus. Thomas doubted. James and John argued about who would be greatest, but they kept following. They kept learning. And because they were not afraid to keep walking through their mistakes, they became the foundation of the early church. Not because they were flawless, but because they were faithful. Some of you have been waiting to make a move until you're sure you won't mess up. But let me tell you, mistakes are part of the miracle. God doesn't waste failure. He uses it, He weaves it, He works it into your story until what you thought would break you becomes what builds you. When you step out despite the uncertainty, you give God something to work with. But when you hold back out of fear, you rob yourself of the very experiences that would have matured you. Let me speak to your spirit. Stop waiting for perfection before you start. Start the business. Write the book. Launch the idea. Take the class. Apply for the opportunity. Nobody starts at the top. Nobody begins with mastery. You get better by doing. You grow by trying. You become strong by struggling. So don't resent your early attempts. Don't be ashamed of your humble beginnings. They are proof that you're in process. And process is where the power comes from. You'll never find the full strength of your gift if you only use it in safe places. You have to stretch. You have to reach. You have to be willing to look unqualified while God qualifies you through the journey. Moses didn't speak well. Gideon didn't feel worthy. David was overlooked. Yet all of them kept moving. They learned by doing. They learned by failing. They learned by obeying even when they were unsure. Every failure has a lesson attached to it. Every fall has a wisdom hidden inside it. But you won't find it if you run from the fall. You've got to sit in it. You've got to mine it like gold. Lord, what were you teaching me in that mistake? What was I supposed to see in that loss? What did you want me to discover about myself through that closed door? That's where the growth happens. Some of your greatest teachers will be your missteps. Some of your deepest wisdom will come from your lowest moments, but only if you stop running from failure and start embracing it as part of your evolution. You've got to unlearn the lie that failing means you're broken. It doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're becoming wise, you're becoming mature, you're becoming dangerous. When you act like you have nothing to lose, you learn faster. You adapt quicker, you shake off rejection, you bounce back stronger, because you're not anchored in the outcome. You're anchored in your obedience. You're not trying to impress, you're trying to improve. You're not living for applause, you're living for assignment. So go ahead and try, and if you fail, learn, get up, try again, because the ones who grow the most are not the ones who never fall. They're the ones who never quit. And if you refuse to quit, you'll wake up one day and realize that every failure was a step. Every loss was a lesson, and every lesson was preparation for the life you were destined to lead. Purpose will always outweigh possessions. There comes a time in your life when you begin to realize that what you're called to be is greater than what you're trying to get. That no amount of money, status, or security can satisfy the deep pull in your spirit. The call to live on assignment. Possessions are temporary. They rust, they fade, they break, they shift with seasons, but purpose is eternal. Purpose doesn't fade when the market changes. Purpose doesn't shatter when people walk away. Purpose stands tall even when everything else is falling apart. When you stop fearing loss, your eyes open to something greater. You begin to see beyond the tangible, beyond the temporary, beyond the trophies this world offers. That's when the shift happens. That's when you stop chasing things and start chasing calling. You stop measuring success by what you collect and start measuring it by what you contribute. You start asking different questions. Not, what can I gain? But, what was I created to give? And when that shift happens, something powerful takes place in your soul. You begin to live with conviction. You begin to live with vision. You begin to live with legacy in mind. You're no longer impressed by the flashy. You're not addicted to applause. You're not comparing your journey to someone else's highlight reel. Because you know deep down that what's inside of you, your purpose, is too precious to be traded for cheap validation. You stop holding on so tightly to what you have because you now realize that you are not your possessions. You are not your house. You are not your car. You are not your clothes, your bank account, or your social media following. You are purpose wrapped in flesh. You are a calling in motion. And when you act like you have nothing to lose, you begin to live like a vessel. You allow yourself to be poured out, stretched, and used, not for your own glory, but for the impact you were born to make. Look at Jesus. He had no house, no riches, no army, and no worldly status, but he walked in power. Why? Because he walked in purpose. He was never afraid to lose anything, because he understood the mission. He came to give. He came to pour out. He came to sacrifice. And because he was not bound by possessions, he left a legacy that transformed the world. That's what happens when purpose becomes the driving force of your life. Too many people are holding back their gift because they're afraid to let go of what's comfortable. They're afraid to step out of a secure job, afraid to leave a toxic relationship, afraid to invest in themselves, afraid to let go of approval. But anything you can't let go of has already become your prison. And purpose will never live behind bars. It needs freedom. It needs space. It needs surrender. When your purpose becomes more important than your possessions, you'll give even when it doesn't make sense. You'll serve when it's inconvenient. You'll build when no one is watching. You'll sacrifice when others are stacking. And let me tell you, that kind of life is not empty. It's full of peace, full of joy, full of meaning, full of substance. You may not have the flash, but you've got the fire. You may not have the platform, but you've got the presence. You may not have a crowd, but you've got clarity. And clarity is power. This is what separates the people who live successful lives from those who live significant ones. Success may fill your hands, but only significance can fill your soul. Possessions can create an image, but purpose creates impact. And when you act like you have nothing to lose, it's not because you don't value your blessings. It's because you value your calling more. There will be seasons where God strips you of certain things, not to punish you, but to protect your purpose, because some things are too heavy for the journey you're about to take. Some comforts are too costly for the climb God is calling you to, and until you release them, you can't rise. Until you let them go, you can't grow. Until you stop holding on to what's familiar, you can't embrace what's destined. Don't be afraid to lose what you can count when you're being called to something you can't contain. Don't be afraid to walk away from the applause of men when you're walking toward the approval of God. Don't be afraid to lose temporary gain for eternal impact. When you're walking in purpose, loss is never the end, it's the pruning before the increase. It's the preparation before the promotion. And when you get to that place, you start making decisions from a higher level. You stop thinking small. You stop reacting to every storm. You stop chasing comfort. You begin to say, if it costs me my purpose, I don't want it. If it distracts me from my assignment, I'm not keeping it. If it limits my obedience, I'm letting it go. Purpose will demand everything from you, but it will also give everything to you. It will cost your comfort, but it will give you clarity. It will cost your pride, but it will give you peace. It will cost your ego, but it will give you eternal fulfillment. And when you live like you have nothing to lose, you finally start walking like you have everything that matters. Because in the end, your purpose is the only possession that death cannot steal, time cannot fade, and man cannot measure. Victory does not belong to the cautious. It belongs to the relentless, the ones who keep going when others stop, the ones who press forward through pain, confusion, and uncertainty, the ones who don't need to feel comfortable to be committed, the ones who understand that progress doesn't always look pretty, but it's powerful. Victory is not for the safe, the hesitant, or the overly calculated. It's for those who dare to risk it all in pursuit of what God has placed inside them. You cannot tiptoe into greatness. You cannot whisper your way into purpose. You cannot gently step into destiny like it's a shallow pool. No, you've got to dive in head first, even when the water looks dark and the bottom can't be seen. Playing it safe might preserve your image, but it will rob your impact. Playing it safe will keep you in rooms where your gift doesn't grow, surrounded by people who don't challenge you, stuck in routines that don't require faith. Safety is the enemy of progress, and if you live for comfort, you will die in complacency. There is something fierce about a relentless spirit, a fire in the eyes of someone who refuses to quit, who says, I've come too far to turn back now. They may get knocked down, but they get up swinging. They may get overlooked, but they keep building. They may feel afraid, but they act anyway. That kind of tenacity, grit that's born from pain, persistence that's born from prayer, that's what produces victory. Caution waits for clarity. Caution waits for calm. Caution waits for everything to feel right. But victory often requires you to move while you're still bleeding, to build while you're still grieving, to climb even when the mountain mocks you. Because destiny won't wait. It won't pause while you gather yourself. It calls for action in the middle of the mess. It demands forward movement even when the road is unclear. Some of the greatest moments in your life will be birthed in the most chaotic seasons. Not because everything was perfect, but because you refused to let go, because you kept waking up, kept praying, kept working, kept knocking, kept hoping, even when it hurt, even when it was quiet, even when nothing seemed to change. You stayed the course, you stayed faithful, and that is what separates winners from watchers. Cautious people watch from the sidelines, they analyze, they critique, they plan endlessly, but they never leap. And if you never leap, you never learn to fly. You never know what's in you until you are forced to reach deeper than you've ever reached before. And that only happens when you are relentless, when you show up again and again and again, even when the doors stay shut. You've got to make up your mind that you won't be moved by how long it takes, that you won't be discouraged by who didn't support you, that you won't retreat just because the first door didn't open. Because sometimes God will close one door just to build the muscles you'll need to kick down the next one. He'll allow you to walk through rejection to fortify your resilience. Relentless people don't need applause to keep going. They don't need a crowd to believe. They don't need a sign every 5 minutes. They've made up their mind. I'm not backing down. I'm not giving up. I'm not stopping until I see what he showed me. Because when God gives you a vision, it comes with warfare. But the victory is promised if you don't quit. We admire those who overcome, but we don't always see the battles they fought in secret. The nights they cried but still showed up. The days they were doubted but kept pressing forward. The moments they questioned everything but didn't let go. Victory is always preceded by perseverance, and perseverance doesn't feel good. It's not glamorous, but it is necessary. You may be in a season right now where nothing seems to be working, where everything you try falls flat, where the weight feels heavy and the future looks blurry, but this is where the relentless are made, not in the spotlight, but in the struggle, not in applause, but in adversity, not in celebration, but in consistency. This is your training ground. This is where your roots grow deep. This is where your faith gets muscles. Caution will always try to convince you to stop, to wait until next year, to postpone the move, to keep rehearsing the plan. But if you want to see victory, you've got to move, not recklessly, but relentlessly. You've got to decide that failure will not stop you, that fear will not paralyze you, that delay will not define you. You've got to chase what God has spoken until your reality looks like His promise. So don't play it safe. Don't water down your dreams. Don't shrink to make others comfortable. Stand tall, speak boldly, move fiercely, and keep going no matter what it costs. Because the price of playing it safe is far more expensive than the price of pressing through. So now, after everything you've heard, I've got just one question for you. What are you still holding on to that's keeping you from moving forward? What fear, what failure, what possession, what comfort, what caution is still whispering in your ear, convincing you to play small while heaven is calling you to rise? You've heard it now. Desperation unlocks boldness. That when you act like you have nothing to lose, boldness breaks through the boundaries of hesitation. You stop waiting for permission and you start moving in power. You stop looking for comfort and you start looking for calling. You've learned that fear fades when faith takes over, that fear may knock on your door, but faith is what answers. When you act like you have nothing to lose, faith becomes your strategy. Faith becomes your foundation. You no longer let fear be your decision maker. You let God be your guide. You now understand that you learn most when you're least afraid to fail. Growth doesn't come from comfort. It comes from movement. From trying, from risking, from being willing to look foolish in the eyes of man so you can be faithful in the eyes of God. If you're still afraid to fail, you're still afraid to grow. You've seen that purpose outweighs possessions. That what you're here to give matters more than what you're here to get. That when your purpose becomes bigger than your fear of loss, you stop clinging to the temporary and you start chasing the eternal. You stop living for applause and start living for assignment, and you've been reminded that victory belongs to the relentless, not the cautious. Playing it safe won't get you to the promise. Comfort zones are graveyards for calling. Only the relentless, those who keep showing up, keep believing, keep fighting, only they will taste the fullness of victory. So now it's your move. This is the moment to shift, to decide, to act like you have nothing to lose, because in truth you don't. What God has for you cannot be taken by man. Your destiny isn't hanging by a thread, it's anchored in glory. Stop letting fear of loss become the reason you never live. Stop letting the need for control become the reason you never move. Act like you have nothing to lose, because when you surrender everything, God can do anything. When you release what you think you're protecting, He releases what He's been preparing. When you finally stop clutching the life you imagined, He hands you the life you were born for. This is not the time to shrink. This is not the season to stall. This is not the moment to wait for a perfect plan. This is the time to step, to stretch, to soar. Because when you act like you have nothing to lose, you become exactly the kind of person that heaven uses to change the world. Now go, move in boldness, live in purpose, walk in faith, and act like you have nothing to lose, because everything that truly matters is already won.